Hi, everybody. This is a special session for Move Better, Feel Better 2025. I'm Cynthia Allen. If you don't know who I am, I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner. Feldenkrais rhymes with paradise and Bones for Life Movement Intelligence Senior Trainer. And we're here to have a kind of a special session on the date of Moshe Feldenkrais's birth on the topic of claiming freedom. It's a big topic, isn't it? Big topic. So let me just grab these next people from the waiting room, and I'm going to bring up here beside me, off and on here beside me, the wonderful, fantastic Lavinia Plonka, who was the co-host for so many years with me for Move Better, Feel Better. And totally appreciate you, Lavinia. You can unmute yourself and say hi.
I did. I was just doing mime.
Yeah, good for you. That's great. I know you got a lot going on, but I'm so glad that you could join us here. Yes, there will be a replay for this event. So I'm gonna start out first because we want this to be an interactive event, not one in which you feel like you are you just listening in, but something that we all grapple with together because we're all adults here. And that means that we have grappled with this topic in one way or another. That you may have started grappling with it quite young. I know I felt like I started grappling with it quite young. So let's start with, what does freedom mean to you? What does freedom mean to you? What does freedom mean to you? So let me pop those in the chat, and then Lavinia and I are going to start reading some of them out loud, and try to get a sense of kind of like where the pulse of our group is here today, where the pulse of our group is here today. So let's start popping those in the chat. I know you're starting to say hi to each other. Okay, good. Let me bring up both myself and Lavinia now. Now, I know you might not see both of us if you're on an iPhone or a smartphone, but I have highlighted both of us in case you're wondering why you only see one or the other of us. So yeah, let's start popping some of these out of the chat, Lavinia. So you see here from RD, the ability to have my own agency as I make my choices, decisions.
Right. And lack of fear,
Mm-hmm.
so both of those kind of for me go together. I don't know about you, but uh, you know, I mean, fear is an important thing to have when it's when it's something that you need, but to have the agency to make a choice is definitely high on my list. And then lack of chronic pain. I'm
Interesting.
wondering, I'm wondering about this word lack. We'll have to look at that later.
Yeah, I want to look at that one a little bit more too as we go through. Let's see, to be more mobile, ability to choose fewer, ability to choose fewer restrictions from Kathleen. Uh, they're
Freedom
coming in
of
so fast.
choice, right? And freedom to know how to distinguish amongst the things that I have choices. I love having choice. I would like to be able to know how to not be overwhelmed by choice. To me, that's another kind of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Freedom for rather than freedom from. What an interesting statement. Freedom for rather than freedom from Marie. I want to sit with that one. Let's sit with that one. Spectre, quieting the mind so the heart can hear. Ah, that's a different take on it.
So, self expression, it's so interesting. We don't realize how we hold ourselves back sometimes from expressing ourselves. And when is it, again, when do I choose to express myself versus just going at it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Pia, freedom is the freedom for everyone to be how they want to be. an absence of retribution for your speech and expression. There's a very encompassing definition. It goes outside of me as an individual, which I think is really important. Sometimes we don't realize that what we're claiming as freedom is a restriction or an oppression of someone else. So here he is calling us to some attention beyond ourselves.
There are many, many, many of these that speak about fear and that speak about being pain-free as a path to freedom.
Yes. Yes, for sure. So we're getting some really good hints here. I'm going to read a couple from, of course, a dictionary, Oxford Dictionary. The state or fact of being free from servitude, constraint, inhibition, etc. So, for example, to have liberty. The state of being able to act without hindrance or restraint. Someone mentioned this, that they didn't want to have any restraints except in Feldenkrais lessons, which is a very interesting statement that was made. I think that'll be one worth discussing a little bit more. So the state of being free from, with being able to act without hindrance or restraint, liberty of action. The state of being free from a defect, encumbrance, disadvantage. We're hearing that from some people. Yeah. So those are three probably fairly common, but interesting to take in for ourselves. And so I'm going to read a passage from Moshe Feldenkrais, and I'll probably try to also probably put it in the chat, but I know it'll be likely that that'll get past you. And I have three different passages, and I also have a little video, and then we'll maybe stop and talk about each one a little bit. And let's see how they start to inform your idea of freedom as you've posted here. And yes, Lavinia, you can definitely help me admit people if you see that people need to be admitted and I get behind. So let me put this in the chat for you, as well as read this from Elusive Obvious, which happens to be one of probably my favorite book of Moshe's, which doesn't mean it's reading for everybody. Hold it, I didn't get the right one for you to copy and paste. Let me try that again. Well, apparently I don't have it here. Oh, there it is. There it is. Sorry. The problems of live and spontaneous, whatever we're doing here. Okay, so this is from his book, Elusive Obvious, and I'm reading from, and it's in the chapter on the body pattern of anxiety. Life, the pages will change according to whatever edition you have, whether it's hardback or paperback or any of the editions, so I won't give those out. But life is a process of time, and time cannot be fixed. Without learning to know ourselves as intimately as we possibly can, we limit our choice. Life is not very sweet without freedom of choice. Change is very difficult with no alternatives in sight. We then resign ourselves to not dealing with our difficulties as if they were prescribed by heaven. We'll just read it one more time. Life is a process of time, and time cannot be fixed. Without learning to know ourselves as intimately as we possibly can, we limit our choices. Life is not very sweet without freedom of choice. Change is very difficult with no alternatives in sight. We then resign ourselves to not dealing with our difficulties as if they were prescribed by heaven. This is definitely way up there in my passages that I have held to myself since starting to read Moshe's works.
It's actually one of my favorite passages. I use that passage all the time when I'm talking about it.
I do too. I do too. And I feel like in this passage, he squarely sets the problem of choice or the problem of freedom as one that's within each of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a biggie for us to consider. He's saying, yeah, we need freedom of choice, but he's not directing us to look outside ourselves for it, but he's directing us how to look inside ourselves.
Right. And I saw that someone in the chat posted inner freedom versus outer freedom. And that's really the interesting question.
It is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because Moshe was born in 1904. So Lavinia and I will just give a few little biographical bits about him. He died in 1984. He was born a Jewish boy in a rabbinical family, had two lines of different rabbinical teachings in the state of Ukraine, where there were plenty of pogroms and persecution of Jewish people. I know, Lavinia, you come from a lineage of people who have been highly persecuted.
Right. Actually, my mother grew up just a few miles away from where Moshe was born, but she had a completely different trajectory. She was Russian Orthodox and was affected by, of course, World War II and the Nazis invading.
Mm-hmm.
So different circumstances, but same territory.
Right.
It's now Belarus, where my mother was born.
Ah, okay. And then we know that Moshe immigrated from around the age of 14, immigrated to what is now called Israel. And that immigration took a couple of years, as he, in the stories that we understand, set out on his own to travel that pathway, and was joined by other boys who then all came in together into Israel over lots of different weather. I mean, it's not like these two things are countries are smack dab up against each other, right? But there is a super interesting story, isn't there, Lavinia, told about when, his mother sewed like coins and things into his coats for him. And there's this very interesting story he tells when he comes into a village, a town, and he smells food. He smells food. He smells much like one of the most beautiful aromas. He's so hungry. He thinks, I'm so hungry. And this aroma, I just think, smells incredible. And he goes around and finds that it's a kind of pork, which, of course, he has been taught never to eat. And he decides he's going to spend some of his money on this pork. And he eats the pork and he vomits it up. It's not like he said it tasted phenomenal. And then he vomits it up because it's so counter to his teachings. And then he decides what, Lavinia?
I don't know this story.
You don't know this story?
I mean, I remember vaguely reading it, but you're putting me in this position of like, oh no, I have to remember the punchline.
I think you always know more than me. So you're on the edge of you're on the edge of your seat. At this young age, he decided he did not want to be imprisoned by his teaching, what he had been taught. And he went back and bought it and ate it again, and he threw that up. And then he went back and bought it and ate it again, and he was able to keep it down. So he was already trying to understand. I don't want to make him sound like some superhero, because he definitely was not. But he was trying to understand at a very early age, what is this thing called freedom? In the diaries that were shared by David Katz am I saying his last name correctly? Katz at a conference like 10 or 15 years ago, where he read entries that he was able to uncover of Moshe's young diaries while in the Ukraine. You see a young boy who is just a young boy. He is just a normal young boy. But like adolescents do, he's already struggling with persecution and how people are being treated and deaths, and all of this thing is in his head rolling around. Yes, he has a beautiful book called Making Connections. Um, so he's already sort of, it seems to me, at a very awfully young age, setting freedom within himself. Maybe because he saw that freedom within the culture was not so simple.
But the other thing to consider is, again, going back to this freedom of choice, that how do I find freedom within my constraints? Do I bust out? Do I fight it? Do I find ways to navigate? Because we all have challenges in our lives that create different kinds of constraints. And, am I always trying to fight against them, or do I find other ways to create my freedom? And so I feel that in so many ways, his early childhood and his journey was his exploration of finding those perceived limitations, those possibilities, and how to make choices. You could say in some ways, like sometimes it almost feels as if his journey is like some sort of apocryphal hero's journey, right? Because it's got all of these mythological moments in it.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
but it's there for us as a kind of learning tool as well.
Yes, for sure. The Yeah, and I think, we always have to be careful when we are ourselves the ones who are helping to write his history. And I mean, we have a lot of documentation about him, but we have to be a little bit careful about making him sound superhero. Although, the time frame in which he lived, there frankly were a lot of superheroes. There really were. It's a phenomenal time in history, and the people that, as he grew into a man, he was hanging out with, it's like mind boggling, because he's hanging out with the top scientists, he's hanging out with the top philosophers, and the zeitgeist of just breaking open thought is considerable. So mythology, that's really your topic. Alani would like to know what's a mythological moment, and that's something you should certainly relate to. She needs a little more. She's Greek, and she needs just a little breaking apart of that kind of concept.
So, what is a mythological moment? It's when we come in contact with an event or a situation that seems bigger than our ordinary life, where it seems as if I'm encountering or dealing with circumstance or adventure or relationship that goes beyond the ordinary. That's what I would call a mythological moment. I mean, a lot of people have different definitions of myth. For example, there's a definition of myth being the myth we live in, which is, this idea that we're humans on a planet and that we're the most evolved species, and it's taken for granted. That kind of like I'm living in a myth of believing a certain thing. That's not what I mean. What I mean when I speak of a mythological moment is those moments where it's like I come to a crossroads and choose a road, or I have chosen a road and I encounter big obstacles that transform me. That to me is a mythological moment. And I feel so many aspects of Feldenkrais's journey from what is now Ukraine to what was then Palestine and is now Israel has those qualities, the things that happened to him, how he ended up on the boat, how all these children joined him in his travels, how he got there and helped establish kibbutzes. All of that stuff is larger than life. There we go, larger than life.
It is larger than life. Yeah. And then when Nazi Germany really rose, and he has been working at the Curie labs, and he and his wife are given the task of basically making sure that certain kinds of papers and dirty water from the Curie lab is moved to, I think it went to England, correct?
To London.
Went to, yeah. And the way in which they had to navigate the actual environment of masses of people moving out of the area, out of Paris, I believe it was Paris, Sorbonne, um, in order to be able to get these papers and this dirty water across. It's like wild. You like reading it and you're like, no, that couldn't possibly do, but it is of the truth. It's stuff that's from the truth. So, and of course we're gonna get to where we talk a little bit about what all of this means in our current environment, but I'd like to stay for a moment with this idea of it being something, certainly for the moment anyway, within ourselves, something within ourselves. So let's just read one from the Potent Self. I actually have my Potent Self book, but I could not find it within the book to tell you where it is. I just have the quote that Dwight Pargi helps me with. So, what do you do now? What you do now? What you do now? Let me put it in the chat again for you so you can also follow along. I think it's good to be able to read it as well. What you do now is the most important factor for tomorrow. What you do now is the most important factor for tomorrow. Unless we change our emotional pattern, of behavior, tomorrow will resemble yesterday in most details, except for the date. Except for the date. And I mean, that's the Groundhog Day, like the Bill Murray Groundhog movie right there. I think it was Bill Murray in the Groundhog movie. I'm very bad with movies where you relive the same event over and over and over again because you don't know how to get off the wheel. So many people think that the Feldenkrais method is about changing physical movement only. We're starting to get a hint here that is not really what his goal was.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because I remember in my training, which was with Russell Delman, he spoke about how Moshe was surprised that people were not interested as interested as he was in the idea of personal transformation, of the sort of Socratic process of self-knowledge, that everyone was just so blown away by the physical improvement that's what they kind of glommed onto. I'm totally misquoting Russell, of course, but it was over 30 years ago that he said this to me. But the idea, and if you go through, especially the potent self is all about our emotional patterns, all about our habits that get in our way and create our pain. And this quote to me is so important because it also alludes to this process of habit. Again, we think of habits as only physical, but right in there, he's saying if you don't change your emotional patterns, you can use the word habit in pattern in the same way, you're going to end up repeating yourself over and over and over again. So that's what I feel that the movement, right? It's about awareness through movement. That's what brings me to an awareness of where I'm holding myself in these patterns and allows me choice. Coming back to our theme of freedom, I can't have freedom of choice if I don't know what's going on, which brings it all the way back to if you know what you're doing, you can do what you want, which to me is the ultimate definition of freedom.
Yeah. So, I mean, he had many people who died in the Holocaust, as your family, Lavinia, have many people who died in the Holocaust. I don't think he had illusions that all people were going to be free from outside forces. I think he is talking more about freedom from within the constraints that you have. And that's a very difficult concept to take in, or there is freedom in it. There really is. But at first, it feels like, oh my gosh, that can't be true. It can't possibly be true that I'm supposed to try to find freedom within the constraints of what my life is now.
Well,
But
that brings to mind the Viktor Frankl quote,
it
right?
does,
Speaking of
right?
the Holocaust, right? In the circumstance, the one thing that you have is your attitude, right? Your response.
Your response, the way that you take things personally, the way that you project them onto tomorrow, the way that you assign higher power meaning or lower power meaning, that whole range. And I think that when I'll say for myself, I it's not that I wasn't interested in what Feldenkrais could have done for me emotionally, but really I was in it because of physicality, the physical pain and discomfort and the inability to just really function in a healthy way on a physical plane, because I thought I was taking care of all my emotional stuff. And I remember I think it was like year 3 of my training, that I realized it wasn't going to solve all of my pain, my physical pain, it was not going to solve. And I decided that I was going to quit showing up at the lessons or at my private sessions with people, the functional integration sessions, asking for solutions to pain. I was going to start to defocus from that, because focusing on it seemed not to have helped. and and it was a very despairing time for me, actually. It was actually an incredibly pivotal moment, but it was actually quite despairing, because then I went, oh, I might have to live with this the rest of my life. And so then my next thought that came into my mind was, what? I can't do that. I can't do that. So some of you have heard me talk about this. And then I had to go, that's not true. That is not true. I had learned enough about working with my emotions that I realized that is not true, because I have already done it. I am already doing it. So then if I'm already doing it, I can do it. What else can I start to change about how I focus, what I focus on? Do I focus on the restriction, which for me was chronic pain? Do I focus on the restriction that I have? Or do I begin to allow myself to put my attention in other places? And that was the big opening for me that started to really change my life in such a dramatic way. And that was not directly taught in my Feldenkrais training program. It wasn't like somebody said that exactly. They said it in different kinds of ways, right? Where can you spread your attention? Do you only notice the places that hurt? Do you notice the places that feel good? Do you only notice the places that are heavy? Do you notice the places that feel light? Could you tell me what places feel good? I mean, there's ways in which it's being rolled out and offered up, but it's not. It wasn't. So I got it. Let's say that I got it, but I think that it is difficult to get it in weekly classes, online classes, if it isn't a little bit more talked about in order for people to grasp, oh, what are the possibilities of what all I can get from this work?
You know, it's interesting what you're saying, because so what you're sort of saying is that so much of the learning that's happening in our movement lessons is the principles are implicit. It's not being told to you. You're discovering these options through the suggestion, through the possibility. You and I both know we've worked with so many people who can't not focus on the pain. It's like they'll be like, well, what about my shoulder? What about my shoulder? And not begin to be open to the idea that I am a whole system. I am an entity, and that entire system is participating in my pattern. That being said, there are things that happen to us in our bodies physically that may be with us for the rest of our lives. I mean, I think about Milton Erickson, for example, who Moshe admired so much and talked about him as a more potent person than himself. He complained that when Milton Erickson wheeled into the room in his wheelchair, that more women paid attention to him than paid to Feldenkrais. And yet here was a man who was physically almost incapacitated at times. So what is it that makes a potent person, and what brings us to choice?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, Milton Erickson had to use his mind to constantly reteach himself how to move. He had to focus on nearly every movement. And still, he continued to practice his practice of helping people through hypnosis, Ericksonian hypnosis, its own form. And he had a way of leading people to try and learn for themselves. So Karen says, Cynthia, it feels like you learned it for yourself rather than being told it, which is the beauty of the Feldenkrais method. Yeah, that's right. That is the beauty of the Feldenkrais method, Karen, is that if you're waiting for the pearls of wisdom to be dropped on you, instilled, and you don't even have to act on them, it doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Instead, it's this methodology of how to learn. This is what he said over and over again. What I'm teaching people is how to learn, how to think.
He also said that it wasn't about trying to teach us something, but he was creating conditions for learning. The idea is that I am learning to learn in the process of exploring these movement sequences.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say that I do know it's P-O-G-R-A-M. I must not say it correctly because people correct me all the time. I know it's not programs, but program. The R is program. So right. That's what I'm doing wrong. It's the end of it that I'm not emphasizing correctly. So I say it wrong somehow, but I do know the difference between program and program. I'm going to put in now the case of Nora, because this just when we just said this ability to learn is such a cool thing, then he kind of throws us for a little bit of a daggone loop. In the case of Nora, which is a book about his work with a woman who had a stroke, it's kind of like a little Oliver Sacksy kind of book, I would call it, and it's very readable and interesting. A lot of his work is not very readable. You've got to really stick it out. But this is quite readable. And he says, the freedom to learn is a great liability and a restriction from the start. There is no freedom of choice or free will where there is only one way of acting. Mm. Learning makes it possible to choose among alternative ways of acting. The ability to learn is synonymous with free choice and free will, but once learned, the choice is made, the die is cast, and the tabula rasa is no more. Herein lies the liability as well as the restrictions. So we're talking here about, he's already laying down the reality of neuroplasticity. It's called the case of Nora, the case of Nora. Body awareness as healing therapy. The case of Nora, body awareness as healing therapy. He's already laying down the case for, as he does throughout his books, the case of neuroplasticity, which we think of as being only that the brain is plastic and able to learn new things. But it actually, in the understanding of neuroplasticity, also included is the fact that you will groove in something and you'll stick to it the rest of your life, because once you can groove it in, you can free up resources for other things. Once you know how to put on your socks, or you know how to get a spoon to your mouth, or you know how to walk down the street. And if you've worked with someone like Nora, who's trying to get back her capacity to well, her family brings her in because they think she can't read. But it turns out Nora actually does not know left, right, up, down. She doesn't know how to orient herself in relationship to the world at all. And so he's talking about, within this, he's talking about this process of learning again and how maybe we take it for granted. Maybe that's what happens, is we take it for granted and we don't really have easy mechanism for re-examining what we are enacting every single day.
Right. This word, this terminology that we use sometimes of organic learning, the kind of learning going back to infant development, which is such a big component of many people's Feldenkrais practice, working with children and observing children, that they figure it out for themselves. And that process of figuring it out for ourselves is what happens when we're in an awareness through movement lesson and we encounter novelty or obstacle or challenge. It's this opportunity to grow new pathways so that I'm not just in my rut. I mean, it's great to have a carved road for how to make the coffee, but it's not so great to have a carved road for how I respond to every single emotional situation. I want to create new pathways, new possibilities all the time. And this idea of organic learning, instead of being told what is right, being told what to do, being shown. This is one of the unique things about our work that I so appreciate, is that we don't show people how to move. Again, we're showing people how to discover their own process of movement through a container. We're not just rolling around on the floor with no plan. There's always a plan in the lesson.
But there's a restriction.
What was that?
There's a restriction.
There are constraints.
The container serves to create restriction. It serves to limit freedom in order to discover freedom.
Right, exactly. And I do want to say, for people who are not familiar with all of these books, that a lot of Moshe's writing is pretty dense, but the case of Nora reads like a novel almost. And it's a wonderful way to absorb the principles without feeling like you're being overwhelmed with theory. So, I just wanted to put in a plug for that book. I think it's great.
It is. It's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating read, easy to read. I know you made this case of the coffee. It's nice to be able to make your coffee, but I think he's here today. Brian Shercliffe is here today. He was telling the other day about how he had a particular thing that was bugging him, and I don't know that it was coffee exactly, but it was something very similar that it took him a long time to realize it's this one thing I do over and over again that's causing the problem, right? Because it's so deeply ingrained. We just do it over and over again. I've been sharing with the group this week that I have developed this weird habit sitting at online desk of crossing my arms and taking my mouse over one direction or the other. And it's causing me all kinds of problems. Now that I finally figured out what it was I was doing, I'm like, wow, that is so multifaceted. And it is an enactment of another habit I have in other contexts. So then I'm just reinforcing it over and over again until I really stop myself and go, what is it I'm doing down here? Why have I got my wrists crossed all the time? Why am I leaning over here? What's going on with that? Right. So that the call inside myself gets strong enough that I want a solution, and then I start to re-examine it. And in the Feldenkrais work, we have all these options about how we re-examine it. I want to take this comment and question from Karen about, it's interesting anecdote about Milton Erickson and how Moshe felt about him. Is a potent person someone who commands others' attention? Or how would we define it? How did Moshe define it? Did he define it? I haven't read The Potent Self. I don't know if he defined it. He probably does in The Potent Self, but I don't have that at the top of my head. And because he did say
he, again, it goes back to knowing what you're doing. He did say that a potent person is a person who is able to enact what their intention is.
Mhm.
So, and he talks about how we get in our own way, how we end up jumping over our knees, right? Because we have all of these different parasitic habits that interfere with our freedom of choice.
Mhm.
So he
The byline.
definitely, oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
Right. I was going to say the byline to potent self gives us some idea. The potent self, a guide to spontaneity. And that's a biggie for me. Spontaneity is not simple for me. I think it's a lot easier maybe for Lavinia, but I'm not sure because she was a performer. And I don't know if that means she's spontaneous or not. So, so the spontaneity, the ability to just act in the moment with freedom, with freedom.
I
Yeah.
think spontaneity is a tricky word because sometimes people associate the word spontaneity with whimsicalness or willy-nilliness or flutterby kind of persona that, sort of like unfocused and, oh, I think you want to go for a bike ride? That's spontaneity. And I believe that the way Feldenkrais spoke about it is the ability to know what to do in the moment, to
Mhm.
know how to choose in the moment. And, so like when I studied improv, for example, there would be, you can get really good at improvising because you have, again, a formula. Anytime you go to an improv show or a club or anything like that, those improv actors have certain, oh, they pulled out rain. I know what to do with rain. I know, and so you start putting pieces together. It looks spontaneous, but it might not always be spontaneous. But then you're on stage, or I've been in situations where I've given talks. I'm sure you have too, where you think you're giving a talk about the topic, and then someone raises their hand and asks something out of left field or questions you. How do you respond in that moment? Do you go into fight, flight, freeze, deer in headlights? Oh my God. Do you go into some kind of pat answer? Do you engage with the person in a really present fashion? And this work allows you to actually pull your resources to be able to respond to a situation. And I think this is really, really important, by the way, not to go off topic, but for the times that we're living in right now, when
Yeah, and we're going to
we're in
definitely.
situations where we
Mhm.
are where there's potential conflict, how can I reach for resources inside myself to find the right approach for the moment? And I
Yeah.
feel that this work can help us have those resources.
I want to let Maren speak. Maren, you were going to speak. You want to still speak? I'm going to ask you to unmute. And while she's unmuting, I hope, Brian said it was a pitcher. He was a pitcher of water and he was picking it up way far away from him, I think, in a particular trajectory. And it's amazing how long it takes for something to kind of turn into an injury, but it will do it. Maren, did you unmute? Go ahead.
Actually a mistake. I don't know how that happened, but I'm just loving this conversation. I just want to say so.
Oh,
thank you. But I don't know how I ended up putting my hand up. I don't know how
oh,
to do that,
okay.
but I did it.
But I'm glad that you know that you could, or you did it by accident, because you can too put up your hand if you would like to add something to the conversation. It doesn't have to just be Lavinia and I. Robert had a couple of good things to say. He said, when he was in his training early on, he struggled with overdoing and awareness through movement. And he discussed it with his trainer, Yvonne Jolie. And Yvonne guided him to view this as his own learning process to discover his own limits, needs, and opportunities for self-regulation. Mm. Mm. And Robert Boyce says there's so many times in life we need to accommodate to injury, repression, scarcity, abuse, etc. In these situations, the prolonged accommodation establishes habits which are life-saving in the moment And then later, we might want to learn another way when the danger crisis is far in the past. That's some wisdom. That is some really big wisdom right there, Robert. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's absolutely correct. And it actually goes with the whole topic of chronic pain. The research shows that, when you first are getting the pain messages, they're helpful to help you try to figure out how to stop doing what you're doing. But when they turn into something that's lasting for years, they're rarely helpful anymore. They're rarely, really helpful anymore. So
I just want to shout out to Marie, because she reminds us that a potent person has the ability to move in any direction without preparation. That's spontaneity. That's, basically, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we are, Francie, always learning. Francie, I don't know which part is your last name and where your first name ends, but we are always learning as a teacher, as a student, something that is always changing. Mm-hmm. Well, shall we listen to this clip? I want to stop here before I introduce something else. Is there anybody that wants to share something? Unmute yourself and you can raise your virtual hand. Let's stop and let that happen a few times, maybe. You might be brave. You might be spontaneous. Yes, Diana, go ahead. You won't be on camera. We'll just hear you.
Okay, thank you. I love this conversation. I didn't take any classes with Lavinia, but it's lovely to see the two of you together and see the beauty in both, the differences and the common, it's just beautiful. And I didn't know this much about Feldenkrais, but I wanted to say, I had a Feldenkrais teacher many years ago. And during one of the hands-on work, integrated, I think is the part, you do the floor work and then you meet with her. And I had been going for some time. And in that session, she spoke, how you say you kind of leave it for us to figure out for ourselves. But at one point, she said to me, I want you to feel your bones. I want you to feel your bones. And she said it with such sincerity, and I felt, wow, Anyway, from that, as I drove home, I said to myself, wow, Bonnie believes in me. And it was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary moment. And I wanted to share it because it was like she got through to me emotionally. We didn't talk about emotions, but she got through to me in such a fundamental way that I treasured it. Thank you. That was Bonnie Kassam. I don't know if you know her, but
we do know her.
Yeah, she studied with him, was one of his, direct students. She was in Hartford at the time. I think she's in Florida now.
Yeah, she's in Florida now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you kind of open up a bit of the conversation, Diana, that she did say something to you and you interpreted it for your use, how it worked for you. And of course, that's always going on in communication, but I love how you chose to interpret it and make it useful for yourself. And that you took it as a statement of belief in you, which you then sounds like you were able to go, oh, I could believe in myself. You were able to go a next step further. It's lovely. Jane, let's hear from you, Jane.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to hear more about Moshe and to also see you both as excellent teachers and students. What you learn from us and what we learn from you is just amazing. I love this openness, and I love how it has really changed my life being involved in Future Life Now and Lavinia's class on shift and things like that. I found it wonderful that you were talking about Nora's story, the case of Nora, because I too am a stroke victim, or not a victim, a survivor. And I don't like to say victim because that's been something I've tried to stay away from perceiving in my life. But there are times you had to accept, yes, certain things are not going to go back to the old ways. But, there's now these resources within me and around me to allow me to find a new way. And that has really changed how I've been going my last 2 years in terms of discovering, the things are happening within my body, within my mind. And I really find that the ability to take some of the things from NLP, where Larry talks about the coach state being in that H stands for holding resources. And that has been something that has resonated in me, especially for the last 2 years, understanding that and using that and realizing so many things are available to me. Some things are way back in the Wayback Machine, but some things are just coming right to, right in front of me, and to say, yes, I can tap into that. So thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jane, for sharing that. Lila, and then we're gonna, after we hear a little short thing from Lila, we're gonna listen to, I'm gonna read a comment that goes with the video I'm gonna show of Russell Delman. Lila?
Yeah, this is such an important subject that you bring in today. Congratulations for the choice. This is fantastic. And also the way, those are very difficult times. And particularly for me, it's brutal what's happening in this country and in the world. And the fact that you chose to make the classes that you can have it in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the night, and do that the short experience, as I call the lesson. This is a time when the urgency is to have the capacity, and that has to go to the definition of spontaneity, to recognize yourself at all instances. And so my extraordinary, my shocking discovery was I did the class in the morning, then I start in the afternoon, and I can't accept, or I discover that the perception of the self has changed completely. It is the same, yes, but nothing is the same. And the fact that then, and you do it again in the evening, and the same lesson, look, I had gone through trainings and everything, but it's the timing in history where we are now, where we think that all the PTSDs from what happened when we were younger are, I'm 78, are gone. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, a tsunami that came back, and all the fear and all the stress and all the desperation and the knowledge that you have to find the potent self again. You have to find again your capacity of being there in all the instants that there's where spontaneity is truthful. Yourself, not only to help to oneself, and also you are working with others and sharing and trying to keep growing up to still being able to create truthful leadership in the youth that we older people have inside, and the youth that is growing up. I don't know if I'm going off, but that's what's freedom. Mm-hmm. If we lose that, freedom has no meaning. It's gone. And this way, all of a sudden, in these 3 lessons a day, that I said, it didn't matter if one was sitting because I was doing something. And I said, oh my God, I have forgotten the importance of this constant change that is vibrating. And it makes us be resilient, being self-potent. Mm-hmm. I don't know. This is my little contribution.
Thank you, Lila. That's so nice. So thank you so much. It's really true that, we live busy lives, and And so Lila is saying that she's been doing more than one lesson a day, even though it's the same lesson in Move Better, Feel Better. She's been doing it more than once a day, or at least when she can. And she feels then how that, I think I got this, how that reinvigoration of herself, it keeps changing throughout throughout the day, even that the potency keeps re-arriving. Pia said, on the topic of unexpected questions, at the end of a PhD exam, the level of maturity is judged after how you handle questions you do not know the answer to. Can you discuss a topic without being defensive, somehow embarking into the unknown? So I would like to share this video that Russell Delman, Lavinia's original teacher, trainer, made for us maybe a year and a half ago. We started recording stories of people who studied with Moshe. And I think it takes us into that next step of where we're at in the world today a bit, but it takes us into this quality about thinking. So let me share that with you. See if I can figure out how to do that without, I can't. So I'll just do it the kind of messy way.
Thinking about Moshe and the many stories that come to mind, the one that stands out right now actually comes from maybe the most important learning that I took from Moshe, which is surprising for people. It's learning how to think. As much as learning movement, he was so interested in us learning how to think clearly and with self-questioning. A lot of people don't know that part of Moshe. So in the San Francisco training, he would castigate us for our sloppy thinking and for what he called one-sided thinking. He would say, if you can't look at something from at least 3 and ideally 5 points of view, you really don't understand your own beliefs. If you can't argue against your own point of view emotionally and effectively, you don't really understand your point of view. And this made such an impression on me. And in today's world, with the political world, and oh boy, do I wish this was a part of people's education, learning to think from multiple points of view, to get out of causal thinking, which was another one of his things. And, you know, I would say you grow empathy when you can see from another's view. And he didn't talk about it that way, but that made a huge impression on me. And that's the background of this story. It was 1982, and I was in Tel Aviv. He had had his first stroke some months before that, and I had gone there to give him Feldenkrais lessons, functional integration lessons. I would work with him twice a day. He was just starting to work himself with a girl who had a brain injury, and he would work with her. I'd work with him at about 9 in the morning. He'd work with her around 11. And then I'd work with him again at about 5. And I'd stay with him all day. And we'd sit at his desk and talk. And it was the most formative time of my life. So this was a time when the Israelis, there were bombs coming in from Lebanon, missiles, and the Israeli Air Force was flying overhead frequently to bomb in Lebanon. And this was profound, of course, and we would hear them flying. And Moshe had his little radio, and he'd turn on his radio to hear the news reports. He'd translate them for me. I don't speak Hebrew. And, you know, I came of age in the era of Vietnam, you know, hippie protests, peace. And so innocently, I said, one day we're sitting there and the planes just went over. And I said, oh, Moshe, when are people going to stop killing each other like this? This is so ridiculous that humanity is still in this state. And he looked at me and he said, Russell, you're an idiot. He talked very plainly. He had a smile when he said it. He said, have you ever really thought about war? I go, no, it was obvious to me, war is bad, peace good. He said, do you know that the most major medical advancements in the history of humanity have come because of war? More good, more life-saving discoveries have come because of war. So I was kind of startled. And then he goes, and there has not been one thing that has spread the gene pool more than war, where cultures mix and different parts of humanity mix, and we widen the gene pool. Have you thought about that? And have you thought about all the science that grows when these cultures mix? And he went on and on. And I went back to where I was staying, Gabby Yaron's apartment, and I was like this. I was so sure of my positionality, and we all know that certainty is a great danger. And I was reeling. I couldn't quite get it. I did get that I stopped thinking in my certainty, peace good, war bad. Full stop. And it shook me a little bit. And so I'm there, and it's the next day. Remember, we're sitting there, it's noon, or lunch is coming up. Baruch, his brother, would bring us some food. And the planes go overhead, and the news report comes on. And I say, Moshe, humanity is developing right now with this. Of course, I was joking a bit, but commenting on it. And he said, Russell, you're an idiot. What could be worse than innocent people being killed by bombs? Now, he was not complaining about the Israeli Air Force because he thought they were justified. So we're not getting into that political side, but that there were innocent people, children, who were being hurt, being killed. And so such a profound instance of what he liked to do, pull the rug out from under your certainty, your thinking, your clarity, get you to work, get you to, he used to say, I lost my teeth chewing on problems like this. and I had stopped chewing. And so when I look at anything today, politically, in my personal life, when I can't understand another human being, I really do the hard work of placing my view to the side, not pushing it away, but opening to include the reality of another human being and how perhaps if I had their history, that's the way I would see it. Now, the key here is that you don't become paralyzed by being able to see from 5 points of view. You still have to act. He was a man of action, of doing. And so sometimes when people widen their view and open their heart, they become stuck. It's not that. It's being able to enact your point of view with strength, with dignity, and with the pain of appreciating that others are really seeing it differently and they are valid in their view. So That's my story of Moshe and the greatest gift he gave me.
Hmm. 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 You heard that story firsthand in his training, your training, huh, Lavinia? Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, I'm actually somebody who struggles once I open my lens and I start taking in a lot of different viewpoints. I find myself changing positions quite frequently. But I find over and over again that when I don't stop to take in other viewpoints, I'm missing so much. I'm missing so much of the picture. I'm missing so much of the picture. It's a phenomenal amount of the picture that I'm missing.
I think that's very important what you just said, because one of the things that this work does is it allows me to expand my ability to see, so that I can receive more, not just visually, but in every way. I have more capacity to be able to see the bigger picture as well as the details, right? We speak about that all the time, the general and the specific, because if I get lost in the specific, then I might miss something very important in my process. And if I focus too broadly, then I can't, as you put it, make a choice. I can't get to where I want to go. And it reminded me when you were talking about Peter Brook, who was a great theater director who worked with Moshe Feldenkrais, and there were several people in the company who became practitioners. And I once saw him speak in New York, and he talked about this process of the details and the big picture as the quality of like walking on a tightrope. And he said, if you're walking on the tightrope and you only look at the other end, your feet might miss the rope. You might lose your balance in a specific way because you weren't attending to what was taking place in your movement. But if all you focus on is your feet and you don't see everything around you, there might be a flying obstacle. There might be some other situation coming up that could also throw you off the wire. So the ability to be able to be on the wire and see the arena is what we do in our work when we pay attention to a part of ourself and then expand that awareness to the rest of myself and how it interacts and how it affects the rest of myself, and then come back, right? I'm always moving and coming back and moving and coming back. And that allows me then to have an expanded view of myself and my situation. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Beautiful, beautiful illustration. I love the illustration. It's so clear, isn't it? There was also a piece there that he said that I think might have been easily skipped over, but I don't think we want to skip over it. And it's the ability to have discussion and look at your beliefs and have some emotional stability, is how I understood it within that. And that is huge. So many of us in this day and age only have our almost unhinged expression of our belief. We can't actually calmly entertain it. And I think this, as horrible as some things are, if we can't come to some place of calmly discussing it, we don't have our resources available to us. We're being run by a particularly archaic but important part of our nervous system, which is to protect ourselves. And that's always a fight or flight response then. But you can't really think. You can't really think. You can't really listen. you can't really get creative within the fight or flight response. Like I'm listening to the Inspector Gamache novels right now. And when Inspector Gamache, Louise Penny, if any of you are fans of hers, when he is in a really bad situation, he keeps saying to himself, and he's just totally, he knows things are bad, but he keeps saying to himself, think, think, think. This is his like way of trying to anchor himself back in to what's available, think, don't react, but think is the cue that this character is giving himself. And maybe you have a cue, like each of us might have a cue that we use when we're in situations like that. Like I will often say to myself, breathe. And my other one that I say is stay present. I say in my head, Cynthia, stay present. Stay present. I say it over and over again until I feel like the moment of me being completely unavailable starts to pass. Hopefully all of us have something like that. Yeah, would be cool to hear.
Well, I think that directly addresses Pia's question, right? The question of how do you face the unknown without being defensive in a situation where you're being asked something that you don't know the answer to. So it could be, for verbal, as in think, breathe, stay present. But it could also, for me, sometimes words are there, but what can help for me sometimes is to remember to sense myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the word remember because it's like remember, like I'm bringing myself together, like I'm calling my parts and saying, hello, you're all needed right now. So can I sense myself in that moment and realize that, the heart is going and the brain is swirling and, can I bring myself to sensing my hands, sensing my shoulders, sensing my breath. And in that moment, sometimes the answer appears.
Mm.
And sometimes that answer is, I don't know. But when I say I don't know from that place of presence versus I don't know the answer, it's received in a completely different way.
And you feel different about it too. I mean, both the giver and the receiver in there suffer with the one way that it's said versus another way.
Because when I'm able to sense myself in that way, when I'm able to remember myself in that way, then I am being authentic, as opposed to imposing some other idea or personality that I think the others are expecting from me. I am being myself. And in that integrity, people feel that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. MB26 says their phrase is got this. I like that. Got this. Eleni says Moshe was also familiar with Eastern philosophy through the judo, I think, and Buddhism, accepting the unknown as a training. Mm-hmm. And there was someone who talked about going in all directions up above. I find that because that's really a key teaching that he brought to us from his years of.
Right. They talked about that as potency.
Yeah. I'm looking for it right now.
I got it.
You got it. Good.
They would say that the potent person is one who can move in any direction without alteration or preparation, thus the greatest possible potentiality. Yeah, we were talking about that in relationship to spontaneity.
Yeah. Beautiful. Any direction. That's important. And when you're trapped and you've got like 5 ways that you can't go, being able to go a 6th way is very, very helpful. Very helpful. Anybody, let's just wrap up actually, because I have to be back online to teach before too long. Really, it'll come fast for me. So I think we better wrap up. An ending thought, Lavinia?
Well, my ending thought is sometimes I was just thinking about this the other day. I can't even imagine where and who I would be if I had not stumbled across the Feldenkrais method. all those years ago. And, the process of lifelong learning is the gift that he gave my life. So happy birthday, Moshe.
Yes, happy birthday, Moshe. And I absolutely appreciate the times that Moshe has visited me in my dreams. I don't know exactly what he visited me for about a week or 2 weeks ago, but it was good. And I woke up and I'm like, oh, he was here, and then I couldn't grab it, but I know it was good. So thank you so much, Moshe, for living on, your teachings living on. And we look forward, I know Lavinia and I look forward to what all of our colleagues and what all of our students are doing with the work in their own lives. It's really not about the work. It's about what you do with it in your own life, So.
And thank you all for showing up to
Yeah.
celebrate with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you're beautiful, beautiful. I'm not going to share the chat. There's not even an easy way to share it with people. So, but I also don't think people always want their names. Some people have their full names here. So I'm not going to share the chat with everybody. Thanks, you all. Bye-bye.